Hello again. Um, I'm just going to take you through quickly. I had a complaints response from Northumbria Police. I complained about the way that my wife and I were treated when they forced their way into my property and stole my devices using this false pretext that I'd vandalized a car of Rachel Hudson, and our own investigations found that there was no trail that we could find that this alleged vandalism was ever investigated at the time, which was 9 and 10 months prior to me being arrested. And also, of course, when I was questioned, the whole thing unraveled. Straight away, I thought it was suspicious when Adam Lloyd let slip that there was part of this alleged harassment was vandalising the car. I was rapidly firing questions at him and he was making errors, and I started to build a picture up, and then it all fell apart in the interview when they suggested that I used a time machine to conduct these alleged acts of vandalism because I reacted poorly to an email my wife received from the family court 2 months after the last alleged act of vandalism. So just to put it into context, that I was cuffed immediately when Lloyd forced his way into the property. I was assaulted in the back of his car. He applied handcuffs very, very tightly, so my wife was left terrorized. So when I was trying to get back to see whether my wife was okay, I sustained quite an injury on my arm from the handcuffs. I was left in the cell for quite a period of time, and I was having to self-administer lukewarm water on the injury on my arm. Put that into context, you see that Andrew Windsor was, I won't use the middle name because I think it comes with some nasty connotations, but Andrew Windsor was not cuffed when he was arrested. Peter Mandelson was not cuffed when he was not arrested. And we complain about these things. There's also the aspect of the way in which we've been treated. It's very much different. So you come to see how, depending on who you are, you get treated very, very differently. Now, the interesting thing about the complaints process is it's very restrictive from outset. You've got to put it in a template that they provide. You can't complain in any other way. So here's a public organisation, Northumbria Police, dictating to you how you have to complain. Complaints template is very restricted. So in the case of a very complex situation like mine, it wasn't sufficient. So, but you have to do it to submit it. So I submitted it. You're given a number, ID number, whatever it is, to acknowledge it. And then I followed it up with a number of emails that elaborated further the full extent of the complaint, the coordinated coercion, and so on and so forth. And these were copied into their legal team and the complaints handling service. So it was all there. So the interesting thing is, and what I'm going to do is copy in the email correspondence I've had with the complaints team the last few days. I'll probably do that in a separate post because it doesn't always fit into the description, so you can see it afterwards. I received correspondence from somebody called A. Cairns, I think it is, saying that this is the summary of your complaint. So in essence, this Cairns person provided a summary of the complaint, which had been heavily manipulated. It wasn't, it'd been summarised in a very manipulative way. And I wrote back and said, well, you'll see that this doesn't reflect it all. There's a number of parts missing and so on. And then a lady called Kate Ingalls contacted me, and who would be overseeing the investigation. And I sort of raised this straight away and said, look, there's some issues here. First of all, we need to ascertain how this is going to be looked at in an independent way that can be considered credible. Then given the missing elements of the aspects of the complaint, I need to make sure you fully understand those, and then the investigation can begin. And I've sort of suggested in the emails that she needs to go back, because of the restricted nature of the complaints templates, to look at the emails that I'd copied into the complaints management service, and then she would gain a better understanding of what had happened. She refused to do that and said the onus is on me to show what isn't in this mandate that they'd taken from the initial submission, which is highly restricted. So straight away you can see what she's trying to do is trying to shut down the narrative of this complaint, trying to restrict it down, because strangely enough, the main parts it didn't include in the summary was the coordinated coercion, which Northumbria Police are a part of. And the correspondence continues, and she's sort of saying, and then she puts a self-imposed deadline on me. You've got 28 days to do this. And I said, you've already got the information, so why do I have to surmise what I've already given you? So they're trying to put hurdles in. They're being very hostile, very obstructive, a lot of obfuscation to try to contain and restrict this complaint. And in terms of the independence, she pretty much, as you'll see, goes as far as, because he says straight away you can take it to some other faux independent organisation if you're not satisfied with our independence. Because what I said is, look, you've got I'm being investigated for this faux harassment with Rachel Hudson, whereas all we're doing is there's two things. We're challenging her of gross abuse of office in terms of her own case, in terms of accepting a falsified, unsigned statement and making life-changing decisions on that. Another evidence where it was very clear it lacked severe integrity. And also our own investigations through that, and how the family courts have been corrupted, how social services have also been corrupted, and we've got this very troubling model where children are taken. Cases are worked to a reverse engineered conclusion from the start. If it's financially viable, they make the decision very early on. Social services, they want to go for long-term care orders. Children are emotionally sterilised from their parents, as we've seen that with the destruction of our own daughter's Polish heritage. And they have clear racism that's been ignored. And so they can be then engineered into cash generative assets, providing long-term cash generation to private equity owned agencies, with social services taking a nice cost of carry as it comes through. Local authorities, that is. So in terms of Northumbria Police, there's that, and there's also the FCA angle, where I've exposed that the conflict of the regulator prosecutor model has led to terrible outcomes for the victims of financial scandals. You put all these together and they effectively all lead into the financial sector, and it just isn't convenient for these things to be raised at the moment when the government, following the policies very similar to the previous government, are very keen to generate growth through the financial services sector, don't want to talk about reform, don't want to talk about regulatory reform, don't want to talk about the integrity of the sector and money laundering and so on. Because of the secondary objective, they want to shut all these things down, and police state terror comes to your house. So why do I think Northumbria Police are conflicted in this? Is because during my interview process, they questioned me on a video which discussed the coordinated coercion I've been experiencing for some time, beginning with the FCA, going right the way through to the local authority, and also now the family court and Northumbria Police. That video didn't name Rachel Hudson. It discussed what I'd been experiencing. So why was it in the interview? To also, it's a pretext to steal our devices, to be able to turn over the property, to look around the property. To put it in context as a reminder, the bail conditions, my bail conditions have been cancelled. They were cancelled in February. They were essentially, you can't approach Rachel Hudson or members of the judiciary and so on and so forth. So in theory, I can do that now, which I've got no intention of doing, so never did prior. We're investigating them, but there's no desire whatsoever to cause them any physical harm or to damage their property, and never will there be. And actually, weeks before, I told them I wasn't coming I was requested to go to the station on the 10th of February, and I told them I wasn't coming because we already knew that they'd used this pretext to enter the property and it was false. So you can see, why would the bail conditions be there? Why would they suddenly be removed? What's changed? What's changed is we busted the pretext. So you can see how they're wrapped in. So we've got a situation. My complaint is I'm being investigated by a police force, which is conflicted. It's actually part of the coordinated coercion I've been suffering. And my complaint against the police force that's conflicted is by a branch of the police force, which is also conflicted because it's not independent. So you can see how absurd it is. The other interesting aspect you might see is she refers to a supervisor. And because I said to her, I'm not happy with your approach, and I've respectfully asked for her to stand down, and another investigator who has a more productive and a more approachable method to work with me. She actually refused. So we've got an investigator that's refused to step down when I politely asked her to, and said I'd rather work with somebody else who's got a greater understanding of my concerns. So she refused. And also behind it is a supervisor, an unnamed supervisor. And I said, well, maybe I can discuss with your supervisor my concerns. But they haven't stepped forward despite my invitation they're free to contact me and I can discuss my concerns with them. This is very similar to what happened with the FCA when I was engaging in the whistleblowing. And I was becoming quite frustrated. You can see all the emails that I posted in the earlier videos over Wealth Tech. And I was getting a bit frustrated because they weren't taking it seriously. And I said, look, the integrity of the industry is at stake. And, a lot of this is in public domain. You should have already picked it up and so on. And the person I was corresponding with referenced a unnamed supervisor. I will check with my supervisor and supervisor. And this is very common what happens because people lurk around in the background. That's why I don't really hold this person to account my contact at the FCA when I was trying to whistleblow and save the clients of Wealth Tech. Because this person was working under a supervisor who was hiding in the shadows, and exactly the same with Ingalls here, the same context, and it's a kind of like institutional cowardice in many ways, and I think you see it quite often. But you can see how I'll keep updated on this, but you can see how fundamentally they're trying to manage this complaints process, manage the narrative around it, try to shut it down and restrict it. Because essentially what else can they do? Because Northumbria Police are part of the coordinated coercion that I've received. So they're actually part of it. And it's undeniable. The line of questioning, the phone narrative that they used in terms of, you spray painted somebody's car. Because you reacted poorly to an email 2 months after the incident. So the whole thing unraveled. So they're trying to shut it down to protect, because they've got to, because it would be a huge scandal. That what's happening in social services and children being traded for profit, private equity owned agencies, prioritising long-term care orders over family reconciliation. destroying emotional bonds between the family and the child to lubricate that model. It's scandalous. It's similar in nature to the rape gang scandal, which the police are, I'm talking generically here, but the police have been complicit in certain aspects in the rape gang scandal. So they're desperate to shut this down. And similarly with the FCA, if people knew, whilst they've been encouraged to take more risk and put more money in the stock market, so on and so forth, they knew the extent of the FCA's catastrophic errors. They would understandably say, well, I think we need to see that the system is safer and more client friendly in terms of putting the welfare of victims before the reputation of the regulator, before we can have the confidence to do what you're encouraging us to do. Yeah, and it's the same process, and also that I know that the wealth tech clients who have complained to the FCA about the fact that they could have stepped in and intervened far earlier, which wouldn't have saved all the money, but it would saved a reasonable sum of it. That they were also met with extreme obfuscation. We can't discuss your complaint, because it's an ongoing case, it's an ongoing trial, it's a da-da-da-da-da. Really what they want to do is to shut it down, to squeeze it, to use time to wear down people's desire for justice. They'll become financially and emotionally drained, and it'll all just push away. And in between, there's a huge tidal wave of new news, and it'll just get buried. And that's really how it works. But anyway, I'll keep you updated. But do read the emails. You'll find them quite interesting. And I think you'll find it interesting because you'll see they provide that early signs, that embryonic signs of a cover-up. Restrict the mandate. Distort the mandate. Control it. Try to make sure the real salient issues are not properly addressed. And let's see how it goes. Take care. Bye.